When you are high ping and low FPS, training grounds and bots offer you absolutely nothing when it comes to learning how to interact with this game. You will still get rubber banded by the bots all over the place, but the bots, being server-side at 0ms, are also running animation speeds at their baseline, the animation speeds the developer originally intended, whereas real players, even console players, will still be running the speeds of the animations higher than their intended original frame rate, with more frames making them faster and faster and faster in ways that you don't perceive in the same way they do. Furthermore, ping is much more volatile in the actual game, and you will encounter many more inconsistencies than you do in training. Furthermore, your FPS will be much lower, so you will not be able to perform the same combos you could at certain breakpoints within training. For example, within training, if I turn off the user interface, I can sometimes go up to 250 FPS. This allows me to do things like the longsword double uppercut and even a flying knives TOD with relative dependency, but doing it in the actual game is impossible. Things happen at such a speed for Lab, having nearly double my FPS, if not triple, that it makes it extremely hard for me to figure out what's going on when I'm playing with him. His animations intersect with each other in highly irregular ways. Naraka doesn't have anything like rollback or net synchronization. He just snaps between animations based on his client-side notifies, which permits him to do things extremely weirdly. Only by dramatically slowing down or frame by framing many of our fights can I even really begin to understand what had happened and why. I had no idea why my F didn't work during this fight. Turns out his ult had already activated on his side of the fence, so I wasn't able to knock him away before his ult took place, which meant that my F was put on cooldown and wasted for absolutely no gain. Not only does it fail to knock him back, even though on my end his ult hadn't started yet, the buff that is supposed to stagger when I am attacked does absolutely nothing, procs and fails to stagger him. Naraka is a game with extremely precise frame timing required in nearly every interaction, but its netcode wasn't built with that in mind. Because Lab has such an insane FPS and ping advantage, I basically have to have reflex timings even faster than the vast majority of professional players would in most games. I have been a reaction player all of my life, and I've been able to react very quickly to events within League and within Heroes of the Storm and so on, but Naraka requires a degree of reaction speed that is well beyond anything I would have been able to do even at the absolute height of my gaming years. Although my technical skills will never catch up to him, my neutrals are not that far behind. I'm pretty confident I would be able to get many more wins against him if we had the same performance point and if things actually behaved reliably. It takes me about a dozen attempts to kill him within this game alone. And Lab has a relatively stable ping that doesn't cause a lot of inconsistency, but when we encounter other people in the game server, it gets even worse, where what should be pings or hits just don't work at all. If there's anything I've learned within the near 3 years of playing this game, it's that the extreme vast majority of players who do well in this game are not really that good. They just have a ping advantage and an FPS advantage, and they've placed time into learning quick-time events. Or they're running certain team compositions within trios that are all about loss of control. In other words, Transformers, Volda, Tianhai, and so on. And that if, for example, I had decent performance and ping, I would be able to compete with the best of them at my current skill level, much less if I was able to train and practice like everyone else can, where pushing parry actually gets you parries, pushing dodge actually allows you to avoid things and not get rubber banded back into it, and so on. Part of the problem, however, is that I am not alone in this experience. The vast majority of people who attempt to play Naraka will have these issues outside of China, and even if I did have good performance, half the other players I've run into are still going to cause me issues because their performance is shit. Even in a rock lobby filled with the best players on the server, while I did not do amazingly well, I was able to get points of power within it. I was able to interact with the players on several occasions. I was even able to occasionally parry them. And this is with my ping going into 85 and beyond. Imagine a world where this actually happens with reliability, where 9 out of 10 attempts to interact with another player actually allows me to interact with them. I will never have the combo skills that these players have because I find quick time events and the inputs within this game incredibly boring and uninteresting. Trying to train them, however, is completely pointless at my current stage because they simply cannot be done at my current performance point. And trying to train parrying, timing, spacing, and other such things is absolutely pointless for very much the same reason. Any interaction I have within training or even just quick match is not going to look like any interaction I have within ranked. I now have hundreds of hours of documentation on these exact subjects, but it is worth noting that there could be a world out there where I am actually able to do quite well in this game, but that is a world where 24 Entertainment gives a shit about performance, and that will never happen. Trying to train around an extraordinarily inconsistent interaction system is basically impossible. When everybody animates at different speeds, when people can do things that you can't do, when some attacks will telepathically hit you from a mile away on some players but not others, and when you get rubber banded all over the place, when certain skills don't interact, it all becomes quite a confusing mess. You don't really have a direction that tells you where should I improve? Where should I be focusing my time and energy? How do I begin to review things like, where do I improve? Well, I know that a lot of my neutrals aren't really that strong. I know that I can be working on spacing. But if I can't get repair dodge to work because it's such an awkward input, then what? Is that even really the solution to winning fights? Mucky doesn't use it, and he still destroys me. Honestly, I have just intentionally not worried about things like repair dodge or even 2-1-1, because I don't think either of them are truly necessary for me to make a major breakthrough in my ability to play this game. There's probably some improvements that can be made to the way I handle charging and handling blues. But until the ping and the frame rate or something that aren't castrating me, I can't play to my strengths. This is something I've established long ago, and trying to navigate that is very difficult. Diab is a player who, a lot like Nebula, said that ping alone doesn't determine if you win or not. To summarize anyways, perhaps by killing him a handful of times, I somewhat proved his point, but I also proved my own point in that ping was predominantly the thing that held me back. That isn't to say that there aren't things that I can learn and improve. All of the inputs I have discussed, for example, are quite a big deal. But the amount of kills I've had against these players are grossly outweighed by the amount of losses, in part due to the technical, and in part just due to the fact that, well, they can do things I can't do, and they have experiences I don't have at playing at that performance point. It's not just that they perform better, it's that they've known how to abuse it. It is possible to win, it's just extraordinarily unlikely. My win rate against Immortal and Customs was something like 1 to 30. Actually, it was about what you would really expect. One tap into TOD every single time. Nebula was slightly less bad until he learned my playstyle, and then, much like Lab, he would get repeated kills off of that because I became predictable to them. That allowed them to abuse their ping and FPS much more. They didn't have to play safe any further. This is one of the last walls to break within my skill, I think, is breaking that predictability. In stark contrast, I have multiple kills on Immortal within survival, and I got very close to killing him countless more times. We were far more even in the actual game, and most of the times I lost to him, it was exclusively due to the performance difference, allowing him to TOD me. Immortal once told me that nothing he does is special at all, that anyone can do it. I do believe that, but there is still a substantial learning curve that is associated with mastering his performance point. But I think I have another problem, and that is I am too predictable. A lot of the interactions come down to the same thing. I don't get parries I should have gotten. I get rubber banded into things I tried to dodge. I'm basically a little more than a bot without the input reading, because what I want to do just can't be done at my current ping. Ping is more important than FPS within trios, and it seems like everybody else playing trios also has serious ping problems or is running micro. Because I can't navigate the vast majority of the game's mechanics, I feel like I have to play in certain ways because they're the only ways that get me results. But due to the limited options available, I become extremely predictable. This is why Lab has so many kills on me. I can't fix those things. I can't do anything to improve my situation whatsoever. Obviously, buying new hardware is entirely out of the question, and the only time I will be moving out of this building is when my corpse is carried out. So it's quite difficult to really actually make objective improvements. I've played a lot of customs with Lab and a little bit with Jesse, trying to improve my shitty skills and trying to become good. While I've been able to get decent victories here and there, most of the time they feel incidental, and a lot of the time interactions with Lab feels like he has such a strong beat on my playstyle, he knows what I'm going to do 2 or 3 seconds before I even try to do it. Of course, this is a person who has thousands more hours in the game than I have, who has played countless more customs against much higher skill levels than I am at, so it's to be sort of expected it feels like that. But the ping and FPS disadvantage definitely does not help, because he can avoid catches that he gets on me without any effort whatsoever. I have to play in an extremely abstract and bizarre way to try to constantly catch him off guard by performing bullshit, rather than actually trying to play the game. Meanwhile, Lynn has half of the ping that I have, and she also has double to triple my frame rate at any given point in time. But against her, I only very rarely lose. The technical skills between her and Lab are completely different. You don't have the hot swapping, the 2-1-1s on top of all this other shit, and the infinite slaps and other things that Lab does constantly. She's played this game for a very long time, but those aren't the things that are getting her killed against me. It's the fact I am often able to read her blues long before they're going to come. For some reason, she is predictable to me. This is a tiny window into the world of Lab's viewpoint against me, but it's such a hard viewpoint to actually extrapolate. Why do I have such a high win rate against the one player, but not the other? That I don't understand. Part of it is due to pacing. When Lynn gains an advantage on me, it doesn't turn into a spam of cancels and weapon swaps and rubber banding all over the place. So it's easier for me to follow and then get back my turn on. With Lab, even if he drops a combo, it's very difficult for me to get back my momentum because it's so hard to match my pace to his character snapping and rubber banding all over the place. Since none of the animations really flow together in any coherent fashion, and I don't have the frame rate to see smooth frame pacing myself despite all the optimizations I have done to my system, well, it just disorients me a lot. And once he gains momentum, there's not much getting it back in many of the fights. But the neutrals I have slowly improved upon, I feel like. Not enough to be competitive with anybody else, it's more an adaptation to his playstyle, but I do see it slowly improving. Something I've noticed is I have a strange tendency to release a blue when I know it's going to be parried, and sometimes even seeing the parry sound and red flash causes me to release just instinctively. What a strange habit. Another thing I have noticed is that Lab has an amount of inconsistency. Some days he does not do very well, also in part because his network is not very stable, but It's also some days I just can't really get much ground on him at all. This was one of my better showings, at least for the first part of the session. I was able to avoid some of the slap swaps that he jumped into, and although I lost most of the fights, at least I put on a better showing than I usually do. I have been trying to integrate dodging, namely tap dodging, into my skill set now that I know tap dodge is actually a thing in this game, and I still feel like it is contributing basically nothing to my gameplay whatsoever. It doesn't help me avoid things, just going for the blue would have helped me avoid. It doesn't get me any more parries than I already got. Hold dodging doesn't feel like it has any iframes at all, and anytime I tried to hold dodge in or out of anything, I always get hit anyways. Trying to jump parry hasn't given me anything normal parrying didn't give me, so on. And anytime I try to do something like repair dodge, it just doesn't work. Not only are the inputs awkward for such mechanics as repair dodge, the fact they're so incredibly specific as to be extraordinarily unreliable to the point 20 hours saw me manage to pull off a single time, well, it's kind of hard to be encouraged to continue to put time in such training to begin with. None of this is withstanding the fact that we barely play with ult as it is. I doubt I ever beat Lab on Justina when he uses his ult. I can see flaws in everyone's gameplay, even Hypernova's. I can see things that they could have improved or done better, or better decisions they could have made, or where some problem spots may come up, or how other players might be getting into their head. The problem is that even if I see these things while playing the game, I cannot exploit them. It's very, very difficult to actuate that information into actual action, because changing my own gameplay and adapting is not something I can really do. Change comes extremely, extremely slowly. I cannot premeditate change, nor can I encourage growth. It's honestly very similar to my issues in trying to learn 3D graphics, amongst other things throughout my life, is I can't just improve. I can't just look at something, perform something, and learn. That's not how it works. It's not how it's ever worked. And since I don't understand the mechanism to what allows me to improve, well, how can you ever expect to improve? It doesn't help that people are not very vocal. No one really gives me much information to work with and what I can do better. And when I do manage to win against Lab, most of the time I feel like it's because it's an off day, because he's struggling with his sleep, or something else. Rarely does it feel like I actually outsmarted him or managed to do something technical and competent. It really just comes down to circumstantial bullshit. Circumstantial bullshit still gives you wins in these games, of course, but when you look at the mean of our games, I probably have 1 in 10 kills against him. It's kind of pathetic, really. Jesse, on the other hand, has a performance point that is not too far dissimilar from my own. Although, as you saw within the July experience video, our interactions are beyond psychotic. He has a much higher technical skill level than I do. He can do 2-1-1 and weapon swaps and juggles, and all this shit I will probably never be able to do no matter how many hours I sink into this game, and I think he has like half my playtime. But what I have noticed is that he does tend to get nervous, and he does tend to get a little unhinged if you manage to get an early advantage on him. He gets impatient sometimes, but throughout the customs I have noticed he has slowly managed to improve on those weaknesses, and it gets harder and harder and harder to take advantage of them. Also, Tessa's buff, giving a free combo to your opponent, is unbelievably broken, and I really don't understand why they haven't fixed that yet. This happens on CN servers too. It's not just because of my ping. One of the things I've noticed is that it is exceedingly rare for Lab to release a blue into an awaiting parry, whereas some of these other players, including this Muscles person, who you could easily convince me is running some kind of micro, will release blues into a parry, even if that parry has been up for a half a second. This could just be due to latency, but I think it is also a discipline thing. Something else I've noticed is that a lot of people only play customs, and they're extremely accustomed to abusing their performance within customs, where you do get very slightly better ping in FPS. Usually, at least on high-end systems you do. For me, it's not too much of a difference at all. But in actual Battle Royale, they tend to perform terribly. Remember in a previous discussion I mentioned Gen Monarch, who I had at best an even kill count against when it came to Penglai, but I had never lost a fight to in survival, not even really that close. And his excuse for that is, I don't take survival seriously. You know, the only actual game mode of the game that really matters. But that's actually an opinion shared by a few people, as they only play customs. It turns out those players tend to be a lot weaker than the players like Hypernova that play exclusively in survival and don't take customs that seriously at all, except for training. Neither of these players with X in their name are actually running from the Xbox. They may have transferred their account off of something like Windows Live, but they are now running X3D processors at the bare minimum, if not running micro on top of it. Micro and parry bots and things like that are apparently so ubiquitous at this point, you just kind of expect to run into it. There is, after all, no moderation in this game whatsoever for global, so you can do this stuff and never get punished. You can run very, very blatant cheating like Tianhai teleport bots, which are extremely common within Rift, and you'll never be banned for it. While I try not to even consider if my opponents might be hacking or not, in reality running an X3D processor is exactly the same thing as running micro to begin with. It's even more effective than micro is when it comes to playing against someone like me, where animations are going to be up to double as fast as mine in certain circumstances, and on my end, it may as well look like you're playing an entirely different game, where many interactions just completely fall apart. Throw in ping interactions and you have a damn bloody mess. This Ether fellow is also kind of laggy, running at apparently something around 60, and I don't think his FPS is too much higher than mine, so the interactions are extremely jank. But at least they're consistently jank. I don't even like using customs for clips. I don't even like using customs for discussions. It's just, this is all the footage I have, because all I've really played, where I've really been able to interact in 1v1 scenarios, has been customs, since I quit ranked solos and Immortal War completely. There's not really much else I have to give for examples for any of my interactions. But at the same time, when I created compilations of combat and particularly of, victories, let's say, it always feels so lazy to use customs. And when I watch other people's videos and it's emphasized on customs, it's just like, wow, you filtered through 30, 40, 50 fights to find one fight where you look good in, and it's predominantly because of you abusing performance that you're only going to get in this one window of area because of how fucking bad this game is built. It's just thoroughly unimpressive and uninteresting. Worse yet are clips and montages based on performing combos where there's very little actual interaction whatsoever. You have the game Naraka, and then you have combos. They are two completely unrelated mediums. One can be interesting, the other is uninteresting. There is nothing exciting about watching combos whatsoever, and when I'm looking at these various fights I have with these individuals, honestly, their neutrals are not really that much better than mine. They have some tech I don't have when it comes to neutrals, but I get plenty of catches here and there that if I did know combos, I probably would have gotten way more victories than I did. If I had the same kind of performance that they did so I could perform those combos, then we wouldn't even be having this discussion to begin with, because that's the main thing that's holding me back at this time. Unfortunately, I can't just learn combos because most of this is inaccessible at my performance point. I can't do most of the things these people are doing. 2-1-1 is completely out of the question, and that's the backbone of so many things. All the lifts and the gravity is completely different when it comes to juggling people on my ping and my performance, so I just can't do the things that they do. There are some things I can do instead that aren't nearly as efficient and certainly aren't as reliable in many cases. So you just don't really get a chance to really exercise that, much less use it against a player. If everybody else can play on reaction and I can't, then my greatest strength becomes my greatest disadvantage. If everyone else knows combos and I don't, then the catches I do get do not come with the same punish, which means I have to have neutrals that are even stronger than theirs by a very substantial margin. In a game where most fights are settled in 1 to 2 catches, it's hard to be at a point where you can settle that fight within 10 to 20 catches, when they have such an overwhelming advantage on you. You need to have combos in order to succeed in this game. Just getting catches is not enough at this point. I am very confident that I can get better neutrals than any of these players within these clips, but I have to be at their performance point in order to make the same kind of mileage out of those that they do, and in order to close the gap, especially when it comes to catching. Lab can get out of catches that I cannot get out of, because he animates faster, he has more iframes, he just has such an overwhelming advantage that I have to work twice to thrice as hard as he does in order to get that one hit. But for him, that one hit is most if not all of my health bar. The contrast is enormous. Then there's all the teleporting, snapping around, and other extremely disorienting nonsense that, while this does occur on CN servers, it's not nearly as bad as what I deal with. In previous discussions, I focused mostly on neutrals. I mentioned that neutrals is some black box that is very difficult to get into. That remains very true. But through the hours and hours and hours of time I've placed into this product since those discussions, I've realized that while I don't understand neutrals, I also think the vast majority of players don't understand neutrals either. Neither of us really know what we're doing, in many cases when it comes to me doing PvP interactions in this game. Most people seem to have a pre-programmed set of responses, and some people can react. This will greatly depend upon their performance point. If they're as laggy as I am, that means they can be abused. If they're not as laggy as I am, that means that the disadvantage grows the more that the disadvantage in ping grows as well. It is extremely proportionate to our performance difference. I will never be able to compete with someone who has 50-40 MS. I'll never be able to compete with someone who has 200 FPS. It's just simply not possible. The only way to navigate that is by knowledge checking, and if I can't knowledge check them, then I have to bullshit and troll my way through. And if they're experienced enough to avoid being bullshitted and trolled, then I just won't win in 90% of cases unless they make a mistake. But other people make plenty of mistakes. I'm just not at the point where I can exploit it. Most of these interactions come as a result of customs players playing in survival and then getting destroyed. This has happened actually quite a lot when I've realized that the people I have been able to beat within survival are the people who predominantly play customs, like Gen Monarch. The fact I was able to so easily destroy him time and time again within survival, and yet struggled with him in Penglai, is evidence to the fact that his mental does not survive being exposed to the actual game product, because he is a QTE player and not a Naraka player. That is why I struggle so much against Lab within Survival, whom I have never managed to kill a single time, even though I've gotten a little close, and that is just because he handles that pressure naturally. He plays Survival much more than he plays Customs, and this is also possibly why I'm able to get more kills on him in Customs otherwise, is because within Customs, I am able to get into his head a little bit more reliably, or his fatigue shows a little more, as he is more likely to do Customs when he's not feeling that well, versus doing Survival where he may be more alert. I have never been in a commanding position within a solos game, outside of quick matches where it's very clear I'm up against new players, so I don't really understand how certain mentality can play into the macro versus micro interaction, micro being micromanagement in this particular context. For those of you unfamiliar with Brood War, micro in this sense would be based on the unit-to-unit interactions. That's where I'm more familiar with the term. It comes down to individual control. So one has to ask at this point, what stage should I be looking to work on my combos, and what can I do to make combos? How can I combo? Is it even possible? There are combos I can do at my performance point, but what those combos are is not clear. You can't just look up videos of combo guides, because every single person who makes combo guides is running at 20 to 40 ms and has 200 to 500 or more FPS. It is actually worthless to watch those videos. They're playing an entirely different game than you are, and their guides are fucking meaningless. It's actually kind of insulting to see this shit over and over and over again. By the way, here's how you do this combo on this character. Oh yeah, it's only available to a tiny subset of players who have spent $6,000 on a new processor and RAM. Fantastic. Very, very fucking helpful. Thanks. Very cool. And since nobody else I know plays at this performance point, I have no advice I can try to extrapolate from anyone. Kubo says I should be able to do the double uppercut a little more reliably at 140 FPS, but 140 FPS is not what I get within Survival. It's much closer to 100. I may get 140 FPS in Customs sometimes, but it is extremely unreliable, which is why I'm able to sometimes frame perfect parry Lab and other times not, because that's just how random my FPS and ping actually are. Nonetheless, that does feel to be where I'm at in terms of my progression with this game, at least in terms of solo combat, is I need to figure out what combos are actually possible. I hate combos with all my heart, but I have to learn something. By the way, did you notice Lynn appearing on this door for a frame? Naraka is very, very well programmed, isn't it? Yes. Working so hard to try to figure out how to play a game that does shit like this. Very much a good use of your time, by the way. Are you guys looking forward to the pit bull that they're adding to the weapons? Oh, I think it'll be fantastic. Finally a counter to the overpowered toddler. Tianhai has met the end of his reign of terror. Simply release the pit bulls, and they will devour everyone's ankles. It will be fantastic. We apologize for any unsatisfying experience during this period. Dude, that is the craziest shit. You have no idea just how unsatisfied I am. They have not deleted Einor from the game. They have not deleted Volda from the game. Tianhai still exists. Save. Jack Cafe X. Spooky, scary skeletons. Got some Smurfs. That's a near outfit. That count is not that yet new. Like I mentioned, I quit solos. I'm not interested in getting ping diffed and FPS diffed because this company does not know how to program a fucking game. But my children got me into trios, and when it comes to trying to win in trios, the only thing I can make a difference in is my own play. So, when it comes to trying to improve the results of our beleaguered trios games, I always default to trying to improve myself. It's not like I'm in a position to coach or train anyone else, and I'm not interested in trying to lead a group. But it is worth reflecting upon our trios games and their performance, because that is the underlying root of this discussion, and why I have been back into customs and trying to become better. Trios in Naraka has been a shit show from the very first day I started playing it. It is dominated by gimmick compositions such as Valda and Tianhai, and transformers such as Valda, Ainur Wang, Faria, and all these other extremely irritating heroes that exist to eliminate neutrals from the game. Furthermore, because Transformers fully restore their health, they basically eliminate the need to have a healer or support character, since if you get in danger, all you need to do is just transform. Now you're going to restore an amount of your base health and have an extra health pool for generally longer than the duration the battle is going to remain. There's nothing really to gain from interacting with trios if you're not going to be running Transformers yourself. It just so happens I don't find those kinds of things very interesting. I've been trying to learn how to play the neutrals in this game because that's the only part of it that seems to be actually engaging. Trios are intrinsically uninteresting, and the fact that Trios is so Transformer heavy means that we're going to always be at a disadvantage trying to play against that. It just so happens that every player I have been playing with, whether it be my original group with Mucky and HKS, or this particular group, is also by and large of the same opinion. Actually, just about every single player I have ever talked to in this game seems to be of the same opinion that Transformers have been a net negative to the game, and that they should all at the very least be completely reworked, if not deleted. But since 24 Entertainment is not interested in the integrity of the team play within this game, much less the solos play, they continue to introduce more and more heroes that have full gold focus for multiple seconds at a time, if not upwards of half a minute at a time. If White, Kanye West, and Lanny are anything to go by, this trend will continue. And then you have heroes like Lee, who are even worse. So whether or not you're just activating an ability and gaining infinite gold focus, teleports, ranged attacks, and other things that just skip the need to interact with the game, or you're flat out transforming and having nearly unavoidable attacks that cause intense issues with ping, like Ainur Wang, or you're just doing something that arbitrarily one-shots heroes in the game because that's so exciting, like Tianhai, chances are you're playing the game correctly. Which means that people like myself and my children are playing the game wrong, which means we're always going to be on the back foot when it comes to team play with a Naraka. That means that we're going to lose the vast majority of games that we play, regardless of our skill level. But how much can be influenced by improving skill, and how is skill actually expressed within team play? This brings me back to my League of Legends casts from many years ago, back when I played with Mildog, Labyrinth, Zilla, and co. Most of which were not team players, with the main exception of Labyrinth and Lizel to an extent, and possibly Volcom. We had Zilla, who would just smoke weed and do his own thing. We had Labyrinth, who would try, but didn't put enough effort into the game to really synergize that well. And we had various skill levels in between. Mildog tried to be a team player and communicate, but mechanically he was still quite weak. Suffice to say that team only barely managed to get into silver, and that was despite the fact that I could play at a level upwards of diamond or higher, and every now and then we would have other players in our group that were also of an exceptionally high skill level. Actually playing as a team turned out to not work that well, and Naraka, while not beholden to the same kind of itemization creep that League of Legends is, where a hero that feeds in one lane can doom the entire game very easily regardless of the performance of the other lanes, still has similar issues. Part of the problem I've noticed is that I haven't really been in a team composition within any game that has really done well. Even though I did raiding at the highest level throughout World of Warcraft, for example, the guild still had a lot of weak links, and it was mostly me and HKS pulling up the slack. Such as, for example, during Wrath of the Lich King and Cataclysm, we would have people in best of slot gear that was available to them, barely able to keep up with characters that I had just freshly hit level cap on. And this was a consistent issue. It was difficult to figure out what allowed a particular group of people to succeed and what prohibited another group of people to not succeed, because extremely few people were ever at our level. Meanwhile, when it comes to games like League of Legends, I never had coaching of any kind whatsoever. Everything I ever knew was self-taught, and this in itself was a weakness, because I had weaknesses in things like creep score, and early lane aggression was something I wasn't good at and inherently shied away from, robbing me of potential opportunities to shine even more. When it comes to Naraka, I am at an extremely low skill level. I have no basis to go by for what makes good solo play, other than having performance I don't possess, playing characters I don't enjoy playing, and playing compositions that nobody finds actually interesting to do. When it comes to the team games within this group with my children, or my previous group with HKS and Mucky, we're actually looking at extremely similar scenarios, even though the skill level of the groups is substantially different. I have improved just a little bit since then. Our Kurumi in these groups is the strongest player of the group, as opposed to the weakest back with Mucky and HKS. We don't run Viper, and rather Lin runs just whatever, but usually some Zai or possibly a double support composition. In other words, a lot of the times, although not always, our compositions are fairly light on both damage and crowd control. But crowd control isn't even that useful against Transformers because they ignore most of it. For example, Transformers can use their transformation to shed Tessa's charm ability, and Zai can't CC most Transformers at all. Kurumi can't do anything against Transformers, but try to stay inside of her ult or run away and hope for the best. All you can really do is try to survive for upwards of 30 seconds and just hope that you don't get rubber banded into a TOD. Suffice to say, hopes and prayers haven't gotten us any more than a single win. When it comes to quick match, like this particular game, we are pretty much undefeated. I don't think we have ever lost a single game against anyone. And that's just for a few reasons. First of all, I'm pretty sure Lab can 1v3 most console players that still play Naraka. I mean, I can 1v3 a lot of console players. I've been able to 1v2 consistently, and I've been able to win almost every single game I queued into in solo for trios and duos quick match. And even the one game that I lost, it was only because I was so exceptionally outgeared. And even then, I still killed a Volda. When it comes to actual ranked, however, there is a very stark difference in the experience levels of the player, to the point that oftentimes, while we do lose most games to Transformers, there are many cases where the fate of the battle and its ultimate conclusion becomes clear to me before the effect of Transformers really begins to take hold. So what is it that's causing us to lose fights? Is it really just skill difference? Is it just Transformers? Or is there something more than just the individual performance? Every now and then I notice Tessa's using V2. That, in general, just seems to be bad. Sure, I've seen Tessa's with V2 wins fights, but imagine if she had some actual CC in this encounter. She might have been able to peel a little bit and force people to actually respect her ult. But is that really what made them lose that fight? Despite the fact that I experimented with heroes in both groups, the way in which I play in these groups is still very similar. The position that I play and the general strategy that I am to employ in these compositions are both extremely similar. We also have a Kurumi, so the team compositions aren't really that different at all. But it turns out that actually between the two ranked teams, they are extraordinarily different. For example, HK has played Rumi, but he was very timid. He knew that he was a weak player, and that he had bad connection, and his performance was not very good. He would stick back and play the 3 position, as you normally would expect Rumi to do so. Lab, on the other hand, is almost always going to be the initiator if Lin doesn't find a way to initiate first, oftentimes when we're out of position. Actually, there have been numerous times that either player has been extremely distant from me. They will get ahead of me or split up without telling me, and I'll be forced to try to chase them down. Usually because they just ignore half the piles in an area, and I'm trying to get the rest of the loot before we move on. Even when I try to catch up to them, they tend to fan out. Lab will sometimes go AFK or tab out for a while without letting us know if something is wrong, and he'll just be left behind. Lin will happily run off without him, and this has led to many problems. This is also coupled with the fact that there are many times that they will not think a team will attack them just because Yang is coming up. This will then lead to us getting killed. I've watched Lin play a little bit, and I'm pretty sure she has many more hours in this game, more than I do, and I think that her mechanics are probably stronger than mine. But something I've noticed is that she doesn't seem to enjoy participating in the customs. Now, it's not like Lab is coaching me or anything. Actually getting answers out of him in regards to a lot of the things usually is just met with silence. So it's not really like a training session or anything, but I still am kind of surprised that she doesn't really seem to interact with the 1v1s that much. Maybe she doesn't really like being performance stiffed by him. But what's actually kind of curious about her is that her ping bounces anywhere from 39 to 69. Because she's on wireless. She could apparently switch to a wired connection, but is too lazy. This means that sometimes she's very, very laggy, which is likely avoidable. Kind of curious, but this mindset does seem to spill into other things where she's perhaps not taking things very seriously. Whereas I think Lab tends to take things more seriously, but he's very non-vocal, let's say. He doesn't really say what he's going to do sometimes, or really a lot of the time. He kind of goes off on his own and has his own initiative and just sort of expects you to keep up. This is where the stark contrast between this group and my old group begins to appear. Mucky wasn't always super vocal, but generally vocal about what his objective was or where he wanted us to go. HKS was usually talking more often, and I didn't really need to say a lot of things, except for keeping them apprised of certain events, happenings, or things I see, or ideas, or whatever. In other words, the fact that I was not trying to lead or micromanage the group worked out just fine. Mucky also had a playstyle that was fairly similar to mine, where he was able to follow me, or I was usually able to follow him. We would have very similar ideas in mind, especially in regards to the priorities in the fights. Whereas when it comes to fights in this, especially since the player base is now quite distilled down to just professional players, it's so hard for me to actually navigate the fights and figure out what to do. Trying to peel Lab is a given because he is a roomie, but since the roomie is usually chasing people around or getting hyper-focused all at once, the way in which this happens is a little different than with the other groups, where I would usually have to choose between HKS or Mucky. Following the leader as a number 2 position is usually what you're supposed to do in that case, or going and try to peel for the support, which usually has at least one person focusing him. I've noticed Lab draws a lot of hate, and he usually has 2 or more people on him immediately, and trying to peel that is very difficult, which has been why I've tried to experiment with different characters, because some are going to have more options for peeling than others. A consistent problem I've noticed with both groups is that if I'm trying to peel someone, we usually lose. In the first group, when I try to peel HKS, it means that our strongest player, Mucky, is on his own. And our biggest chances of success is having a big alpha strike following the Viper's silence and the Tessa ult, immediately killing the enemy's support, transformers, or whatever other problem character that Mucky has singled out, and just focusing and helping him. In this case, it would make sense that I help Lab, the strongest character in this, get an alpha strike on someone. But Lab is roomy. He doesn't really have the kind of tools that Viper has available. If Lab was playing one of his other characters like Justina, or perhaps even Lanny or Volda, then that kind of playstyle might synergize a little bit better. Or perhaps not. Lab and I did play a handful of duos, and those did not go any better than this. And I'm not even really particularly sure why. In the particular example on screen, there was a lot of third parties. And Lab and Lin both tried to regroup a few times, and I also tried to regroup a few times, but we were severely outclassed by the players, along with the fact that both Zai and Rumi need to have more rage to get their ults back than Tessa. The fact that I favor longer fights, but they don't, makes this a little bit difficult. But Rumi is actually very good at long fights, and I feel like longer fights tend to work better with this composition, whereas shorter fights tended to work better with my previous composition, and that's primarily just because of the cooldowns. But I think Lab works better in longer fights, and so does Lin. Whereas I don't fatigue in the same way other people do, and if I am able to slow down the pace of a fight, I usually do better. However, a lot of trios fights end almost instantly. These are a rare exception. I will be the first to admit, I do not even begin to understand the playstyle of Lab or Lin. I have no real idea what their goals are, or what their overall strategy to trios even is. Because I don't even really know what their solos is. What I have noticed is that Lab does not really like hot drops. Lin seems more open to hot drops, but Lab in general does not really like even choosing where we spawn. When I first started doing trios with them, I zoned into them having set their spawn points to me, because neither of them wanted the responsibility. But I have a feeling that if I threw them into a hot drop every single time, they'd probably get really mad. So I don't do that. But at the same time, I'm not really particularly fond of ratting in these games either, because it always feels so pointless. And even when we do get a gear advantage, it doesn't really necessarily help us out. In this particular match, the game crashes when I attempt to zone into the lobby. Typical Naraka. It ends up auto-picking Syra. My Syra is V1. V1 is not the standard build for Syra in trios, although I have seen a few players pick V1. V1 has been nerfed a lot, and Syra in general is not nearly as strong as she once was. But she is still a transformer, she still gains free health, and the laser and the burst can still be nice to have. However, it can be difficult to work with because a lot of the times the balls just get incidentally iframed, or people get knocked out of the stuns. But I thought, it's okay as long as I can peel Lab with her. This will actually surprisingly work out kind of well. Mainly because being able to transform and move away gave me extra survivability, so that in many cases where I would have died immediately, I did not die immediately. And I find that generally when we lose fights, it's either from Transformers insta-gibbing us completely, or one of us dying in an instant. Either because they were able to focus Lab or Lin, or because I am out of position like some kind of moron. In our sole win, I played Terra. I really enjoyed Terra's damage on her ult, and I felt like I had greater reliability with that ult than with Tessa's. However, Terra does not have an escape, and being unable to escape Transformers like Einor once they've grabbed a hold of you, or the new Kanye hero, really added the extra layer of difficulty in making her work, especially in a game mode where literally everybody seems to fucking magnetize to me. So I really did not enjoy that. But at the same time, other heroes like Tessa or Zenda, I was still really struggling to escape from people focusing me. Perhaps having extra health from playing a Transformer may be one of the things I need to consider sticking to more often within these trios games. And Syra being a hero I've played at least a little bit, may be the Transformer I rely on for that. I've tried Valda, but I really struggled to make it work, because I wasn't really sure when was a good time to throw water spears, and I was kind of surprised at what things permitted enemies to be immune to them. Namely Akos, although it's not often for us to run into Akos in trios at this point, despite how powerful he is. However, something I've noticed is that although I often see teams running Transformers with Kurumi, I very rarely see them running with Zai. Zai does not really seem to synergize with them that well, unless they offer some hard CC like Ainur or Yue Shen. And even then, it's actually more efficient just to run a second Transformer anyways, because Kurumi can just focus on healing them and ignore fighting, as opposed to having to peel for the Zai or peel for herself because the Zai can't peel for her. Especially when you're fighting a lot of Transformers, I don't provide any real crowd control as Syra other than throwing the balls, which don't really seem to help at all against other Transformers. So it's mostly about being selfish and surviving on my own, which would be nice if Lin and Lab could actually stay alive as well. But that doesn't necessarily happen in this game. This fight goes really about as well as you could have hoped. We're up against Zenda, Kanye, and a V2 Syra. But the V2 Syra does not really seem to know how to play V2 Syra, and kind of exhibits the same problems I had when I tried to play her. And that is, she uses her ult when she's really far away and doesn't really try to close the distance. I struggle to find any ground in here because there's just gold focus all over the place, and a lot of the things I try to parry are out of the way. However, my incidental ball did help peel Lab, and I put some damage on the V2 Syra since she doesn't get free health on that form. I continued to try to peel for Lab, which they did focus on, but didn't really do a lot of damage to, although they did force this ult out. The gold focus from Zai is able to peel for me, but I end up getting parried. I just pick up my weapon and continue to try to parry the staff users that are harassing the other players, but I'm not able to navigate in here. This is one of the things I don't really know how to deal with in trios. When do you find your place to go in when there's so much gold focus and stuff flying around you can't parry or clash or do anything with? You're kind of just stuck waiting, and that just feels wrong. Nonetheless, we do manage to win. We will fight the same group again coming out of Yang, in which the first half of the fight I have a much stronger showing than in Yang. I will come to engage and peel. You can see Lab charge in heroically, and Lin is going to end up fighting Kanye for a while. I'm going to take focus from both the Zenda and the other Syra every so often, which is going to be nullified by the fact that I can just fly away from them and the fact I have temporary health. The other Syra will now begin to try to move in with V2 to get in the stun, which she will be successful. I'm waiting for it to go off so I can attempt to peel, but I'm instantly grabbed from Kanye instead. That is damage that could have gone on Lin that may have even killed her, just because of the burst that it does. Then comes some random parry that I didn't even see, and we're going to clean this relatively easily. Syra helped me out in this fight, not only by providing an incidental stun, but by allowing me to eat the action economy of several players without any threat to my person. In the following battle, we attempt to take the Spirit Line, which is almost always going to be a shit show no matter what. Our group doesn't really have a lot of standing power for the Spirit Line, because Rumi and Zai are really only going to be able to hold it so long as our ults are actually up. V1 Syra is really going to be there to try to peel for them and be annoying at a distance. The range allows her to hold the area and force people away. However, it's quite likely that I actually used my ult a little too early. I think that Syra V1's ult is a little bit more valuable than the other two when it comes to zoning in this, just because theirs relies on the party actually engaging you, whereas Syra can be used to try to force people out of it and zone them away from the Spirit Line so you can catch it. When I don't have the ult or my F, I am subject to ping, which means that the Yodo is permitted to parry rob me and kill me in what should have been a parry. However, Canada, LOL. We will subsequently wipe at this point except for Lyn, whom will move on to revive us, permitting a final disastrous fight for the session. During this period, I have encountered what appears to be a bugged armor powder, where attempts to loot it are not proving to be successful. Therefore, I have not fully healed. A problem that I used to have when I first started the game, but have gotten a lot better at, except for this particular instance apparently. This allows that Yodo team to jump us while we're relooting our bodies. I don't heal since I've only got the 2 shitty healing, even though there's healing right there. I try to follow the initiative of my party since we seem to have the advantage. Indeed, I'm able to get a lot of damage onto this zipping, but unfortunately Yodo definitely is using a gold weapon or something and is able to get an absolutely crazy amount of damage immediately. This Yodo will then proceed to kill the other 2 players even after the zipping is killed. Lyn will escape once again, but the game will be lost and we will get only 3rd place. In this particular instance, being Syra didn't really matter. If I had had my ult, we probably would have won, however. And perhaps if I had healed, I might have survived the whip sword. I'm not sure. But certainly tunnel visioning on the aggression was the wrong decision in either case. I have to take a pause at some points and evaluate my current position, and not follow Lab just because he's the better player. I should be more conscious about self-preservation. Sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I feel like if I don't capitalize on an opportunity he makes, I will lose anyways. At times I feel like I'm pulled between several decisions and there's no clear one that is worth making. But I think generally self-preservation is supposed to be your focus within high-level play. But it doesn't feel like no matter how much I focus on that I'm able to preserve it all. This will be my only Syra game in any of the series, but I feel like I should try her more. There's several major conflicts I've noticed early into the trios that further exposure has only cemented my observations in. The first is that Lab does not play Rumi like a support, at least in trios. Again, he's not playing her like position 3, he's much more of a position 1. He is going out there and initiating constantly, without really having the tools to do so, but just kind of doing so. For better or for worse, this sort of telegraphs how a lot of fights are going to go, and places more emphasis on peeling than just trying to attack people who are going after your Rumi. When I watched some of the French high-level videos talking about team positioning and supports, I noticed that the Rumi was often left on her own, which is also probably the reason why most supports appear to have the strongest neutrals of the group. In fact, I was even told as much that most often the case supports are the ones with the strongest neutrals, so that they can survive and keep themselves alive, while the other 2 people are focusing on their own priorities. That's not really an option in these games. We're not at that level, and I feel obligated to follow Lab around because he is the strongest player, so of course he has the best idea of what to do and who to focus. But at the same time, I feel like I complicate his job. Every now and then I end up breaking a parry. Every now and then I end up breaking one of his combos. Sometimes I'm not quite entirely sure what his attack strategy actually is, and I'm just trying to follow his tempo, but I have a hard time doing that because not simply the mechanical differences, but the way in which he approaches neutrals in fighting are also very different. Following Lyn can also work out, although she tends to be even more unpredictable in some manners. I've noticed in duos that Lab tends to follow her pacing a little bit more, especially since he is usually playing support exclusively for her, whereas in trios he does seem to ignore me sometimes, and there's plenty of times I've died without him ulting, and I feel like that I shouldn't be looking at his ult in the same way I would someone like HKS, who used the V2 anyways. Well, Lab, I feel like, uses it a little bit more to preserve himself, and perhaps the key to success is not relying on it at all. That's where playing something with more self-preservation has come in mind, and why I thought Syra might work a little bit better, and perhaps that's one of the reasons why Syra worked as well as it did, is because I didn't really have to rely on the Rumi to get me out of situations anyways, at least up to a point. Tessa is one of the weakest heroes in solos. In trios and duos, she is supposed to be quite strong, especially since you can cycle her ult multiple times if you live for a while. But in these games, I often find myself questioning, is there really a way I can even make her win with this team? Because I haven't been able to do so yet, and I'm not sure why. What is it precisely that is causing us to fail? Isn't even anything I can influence. And that is why I've just gone back to the basics, trying to learn how to do neutrals, trying to figure out how to actually play the game. It's about all I really can try to do, because I don't understand the mechanisms of why what I'm currently doing is not succeeding. When I was watching Zorayan, Kuhara would run V1 Syra in some of the duos, and they made it work. But Zorayan and Kuhara are amongst the top players in the entire server, so I think they can make just about anything work. But what I did notice is that having a transformer certainly increases your personal survivability. After all, temporary health is overpowered, and if you're going to be focused or feel like you're going to be caught in something, you can just push your ultimate and ignore a chunk of it. Even if you ultimately get sucked into some kind of combo or TOD situation, you at least prolong your survival long enough that if your support is currently busy with something else, it gives them a chance of catching up and possibly saving you from death anyways. In these particular fights, we often get separated into separate 1v1s. One of my mindsets that come from games like League of Legends, Heroes of the Storm, World of Warcraft, and so on, is that focusing the support is important. The less healing that the support is able to do, the less damage that you have to do to win. It's simple math. Killing them early removes a player that is providing extra effective health for the opposing team. It's very critical. But if that support in Naraka is generally going to be too difficult for you to kill, then ultimately the amount of damage that you're putting onto them is getting padded. You're not removing those effective numbers, and your effective numbers are being nullified. So often, trying to focus the target of your leader is the biggest priority. But that doesn't always work in this, and I find it hard to follow another target amidst all the golds and blues and purples, transformers, and so on, whereas oftentimes I feel like I'm just pissing in the fucking wind trying to follow Lab or even Mucky around in half of these games. So often I'm looking for opportunities, I'm trying to be opportunistic, but that doesn't work either. A lot of the times in most fights, it feels like I'm not contributing anything whatsoever. Having a gold-focused transformer like Syra or any of the others allows you to get into something and at least be a bit of a pest. Even if ultimately you're still going to lose, at least you can contribute a little more than nothing. Having ultimates like Tessa is also supposed to allow you to do this, but a lot of the times it doesn't seem to make the difference that I'm really hoping for. Especially since Tessa's ult has 2 stages of failure, and all someone has to do is pop a shale shield and everyone can remove it for free. And if you try to stop them, they're going to hit you with far more damage and a longer crowd control than anything you would have gained out of your ultimate. But us trying to run shale hasn't had the same results, and I'm not entirely sure why. Why does us running those compositions not have the same results? Our players are strong, at least Lin and Lab are strong, so where is the weakest link? Is it because I can't synergize with their gameplay? Is it because our mindsets are so different? Is it because the unsung communication is something I should be just picking up on at my level of experience, but I'm not? Or is it because our hero compositions are too outmoded by the current meta, and because Akos, Shale, and everything else are just so much more powerful, but we're not quite at the stage where we can maximize those strengths ourselves because those just aren't the heroes that we normally play? Is it truly hopeless, or are we simply at a stage where, since we're not at the top 10 players, we just can't win no matter what we do? I've always refused to believe that I cannot defeat a high-end player in any other product, but when it comes to Naraka, my disadvantages at the mechanical level are vast, and at the technical level I can never close the gap between myself and someone who runs at 50 ms and 200 fps, so it's always going to be an uphill battle no matter what I try to do. If I try to find a way to pad that, it doesn't necessarily feel like I'm making any progress, but rather delaying the inevitable. If the strategy is to rely on Lab to kill everyone because he's the strongest player, perhaps delaying the inevitable is all I really need to do. But that isn't what earned us the one win. There is perhaps two approaches I could try to do. Well, one I've tried to do, but I'm gonna be honest, I'm so fucking addle-brained it's hard to remember. And that is A, focusing more on ranged weapons, and B, playing something like Syra more so than Tessa. While I will lose the crowd control that Tessa offers, I don't feel like we're nearly synergized enough to take advantage of it to begin with. It helps me more in solo situations because it's the character I play the most. Tessa can most certainly be considered my main. But I've also played a lot of Zai, and that's had mixed success as well, where I've had good games and bad games. But none of it seems to really synergize well with the group that I'm playing with. Rather, I should probably focus more on my own survival. I should be treating it less as trios and more as group solos. As that often happens, is that if we're going to get focused in a group scenario, we're probably not going to do anything about it regardless of our team composition. We can try to comp around it, but if players aren't comfortable playing together, it's not really going to matter what we're playing in that case. The synergy is never actually going to link up. So we should probably just be focusing on what we're the most comfortable with. Lab is comfortable playing roomy, and he's comfortably playing aggressive. I'm not really sure what Lynn's main is. I have to assume it's Zai, although she's tried a little bit of everything. In any case, I should be focusing on what I know how to play, and precisely what I know to survive with. I should be looking at picking up more cannons, and trying to play at a range. If Lab is going to play aggressive and be the initiator, I should perhaps be looking more at playing the 3 role than playing the 2 role. Even if these numbers and roles ultimately don't equate to anything, it comes with a mindset change that I think is necessary to start seeing more ability to at least read what is going on, as I often get very confused during these games and have a hard time understanding precisely why we're winning or losing. Being able to observe and forcing myself to pace myself out and stay at a range more may help me at least be able to understand the hows and whys we're losing and be able to figure out a strategy to try to improve the situation, rather than just hoping I'm going to be able to figure it out, which at my current pace is getting me nowhere. To be clear, I'm not stating these things with the intent of criticizing any of the players or their playstyles. I'm merely observing the differences between our mindsets and the things I came to expect, and likely erroneously so, out of team play within this game. I've only watched trios a little bit from the NBPL because I find it so fucking boring. And the trios that I've played prior to this group with my other one weren't really educational either. All they really told me is that the vast majority of teams that we run into are extremely well synergized, and regardless of the players and regardless of the heroes, we always seem to run into the same situation, where if I end up in a 1v1, I'm going to lose. And if there's an actual dedicated team fight, chances are we're going to lose really fucking badly and very, very fast. Playing the customs has taught me a little bit more what to expect out of certain damage combos when I get hit by them, but it hasn't improved my own gameplay whatsoever. I feel just as clueless and technically inept as my very first month into the game when I started doing my very first customs with Mucky. I haven't learned hardly anything since then. I haven't gotten any better at reading or following neutrals. Although I'm using tap dodge a little bit, it isn't really giving me anything that just parrying would have otherwise. I still get robbed of every interaction that I have with the vast majority of players. I've been able to follow some of the pacing a little bit, but I still get very disoriented when someone starts speeding up the fight. I've had some success with the new parasol weapon, mostly because it is ridiculously overpowered, but partly because its mix-ups allow me to mind game a little bit more that I find very difficult with the other weapons. The Parasol is likely capable of a lot of very strong TODs and mix-ups that people haven't discovered yet, or at least have not become widely known. But it is extremely powerful just as a general attack weapon because currently its modifiers are insanely fucking high, and they were further buffed after these recordings were made, which is actually just crazy. Just like the new hero, they insist on making these release items incredibly powerful. But even after the Parasol starts getting brought back into the range of the other weapons, it will always be incredibly strong just because its mix-up potential allow a lot of mind games that I find very difficult with the vast majority of weapons. It's similar to the heavy weapons in that I'm able to outpace certain players by slowing down the fight forcibly and forcing them to respond to the way I interact, which is one of the few reasons I've been able to get certain victories out of certain encounters I had no right winning. While I can certainly point out any given individual decision within any of these fights that could have been made better, or things I could have done to try to improve the situation, the reality is I get so confused by a lot of the things that happen in trios. I'm not really capable of making decisions even within the spectrum of what I do know how to do in this game. I don't play this very well. I have a hard time following it. It took me a long time to start to begin to understand teamfights in League of Legends, and even then a lot of what happened in the actual game still outpaced my ability to track it. I was able to follow solos and even duo fights to some extent, but trios remains an incomprehensible mass. Part of it is just because blue focus and Fresnel and the lack of proper lighting and stuff like that make reading very, very difficult. One of the things I commonly struggle with on Terra is hitting her ult at a distance, because the depth perception in this game is fucking insane. And this game isn't even as bad as League and stuff in that regards, where they don't even have a proper rendering engine to begin with. While this game does struggle, some maps are worse than others. I'm also absolutely horrendous with certain weapons. The dagger is probably my worst weapon, followed by the longsword, and to an extent the whipsword, but the dagger is definitely the absolute worst. I commonly make soul break when I don't intend to, and although I can try to spam the jades, I don't get any damage out of the base because I don't understand any of the tech that people use, and when I ask about it, I don't get any response. I have close to 1900 hours in this game at this point, although a very large chunk of that is idling in Penglai now. But I don't really feel like there has been any improvement from 200 hours, 300 hours. There is no real milestone in terms of time investment that is resulting in me getting real improvements. Whether it's solos, whether it's trios, anything like that, I'm just not really permitted to do any of the things I want to do. And when I analyze these games and try to figure out what's going on, I don't feel like there's anything I can say that's like, wow, this could be a big difference. Or if I do this, it'll suddenly improve everything. I can only try to say, well, I might try to do something here, but there's no real guarantee it'll even work, because most of the things I try to do don't really work out anyways. And Trios is so fucking chaotic and so hard to figure out what's going on that it's arguable if anything I can try to do would actually help it or not. That's why I just try to focus on myself. If I can maybe push that line just ever so slightly upwards, I might see results elsewhere. But it feels pretty hopeless trying to do so. Nonetheless, I have nothing else to live for, so I guess I may as well keep trying. At least until my children get tired of losing because of me.